In 1963, Stanley Milgram published the results of an experiment that shook the field of psychology. Subjects instructed by an authority figure to administer electric shocks to a screaming victim did so, repeatedly and at dangerous voltages, even when the victim begged them to stop. The experiment was designed to understand the Holocaust, specifically, how ordinary German bureaucrats and soldiers could participate in systematic mass murder. Milgram's answer was disturbing: the capacity to commit atrocities under authority instruction is not limited to pathological individuals or uniquely brutal cultures. It is a normal human response to legitimate authority in institutional settings. Philip Zimbardo's Stanford Prison Experiment, 1971, despite its methodological problems, pointed in the same direction: put ordinary people in institutional roles that normalize cruelty, and cruelty becomes normal. These experiments do not excuse obedience to murderous orders. They explain why it happens, and therefore what conditions need to change to prevent it. Religious authority operates as a uniquely powerful form of the Milgram authority dynamic. Obedience to God, mediated through human representatives, combines the social pressure of authority with the spiritual pressure of eternal consequences. The believer who disobeys a religious command is not just breaking a social rule, they are defying the creator of the universe. This dynamic is present in all three Abrahamic religions. The binding of Isaac, in which God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son and Abraham obeys without question, is a foundational story precisely because it dramatizes the absolute priority of divine command over normal human moral intuition. In extremist movements, this dynamic is deliberately exploited. The leader claims divine authority, which makes questioning the command both sinful and dangerous. Researchers of totalistic groups, cult researchers like Robert Lifton and Stephen Hassan, have documented how this dynamic is manufactured through isolation, sleep deprivation, information control, and confession practices that break down independent judgment. The psychology of group identity adds a second layer to the Milgram dynamic. Henri Tajfel's social identity theory, developed in the 1970s, showed that people derive significant portions of their self-esteem from the groups they belong to, and therefore have powerful motivations to see their groups as superior and outgroups as inferior. In extremist movements, this dynamic is intensified. The movement's theology provides cosmic justification for in-group superiority, and the daily practices of the movement, communal prayer, shared meals, physical training, shared sacrifice, build an intensity of in-group identification that makes defection feel like psychological self-destruction. Jonathan Haidt's research on moral psychology adds another dimension. Moral intuitions operate faster than conscious reasoning, meaning that by the time a movement member is reasoning about whether a violent act is justified, they have already felt the moral elevation of righteous action. Counter-extremism programs that engage only at the level of conscious reasoning are fighting on the wrong battlefield. The lesson of the psychology of obedience is that structural conditions matter as much as individual psychology. Milgram's subjects were not pathological, they were ordinary people placed in conditions that made obedience to lethal authority psychologically normal. Changing individual psychology is important but insufficient. Changing the structural conditions, ensuring that religious authority is accountable, that communities contain multiple sources of authority that can check each other, that individuals have strong relationships outside the extremist community, is what makes individual resilience possible. Communities that maintain what sociologists call bridging social capital, relationships across group boundaries, are consistently more resilient against extremism than communities organized entirely around internal solidarity. The policy implication is that programs that increase contact between different communities, interfaith dialogue, mixed schools, intercultural sports programs, are not soft or peripheral. They are structural counter-extremism investments. Thank you for watching The Shadow of Extremism. Sources and references are on screen. Subscribe to follow the full series.